Hi everyone and welcome today. It is Thursday, April 23rd. I'm Dr. Anthony James. I'm the Dean of the SomaVeda College of Natural Medicine and the current Ajahn or Master Teacher of the SomaVeda Thai Yoga Practitioner Certification Program here at the Thai Yoga Center. And it's a really interesting time that we find ourselves, and I think these lessons on BET and on tapping are more appropriate now than ever before, because who is not having some mental or emotional, dare I say it, psychological issues that are experiencing right now? And especially if you're a therapist, and it is really important that you be able to counsel your clients with this idea of energy psychology to help them get to the other side of this, whatever that looks like, whenever that looks like. We need to really understand that the emotional disturbances that we're all sharing right now are actually energy distortions or energy disruptions of the body's energy system. So today, back to the BET, the Bio-Tapp or BET manual, Touch, Balance, and Attunement Technique. Today's lesson starts on page 67, premise number 25, which is on the bottom right-hand side of the page. And I'm going to start going through the premises like I have up to this point, but I want to reach out and really encourage you to ask questions or make comments in the comment line or in the courses that you find this material in. If there's something you don't understand or something that's not here that you would like to see more information about. Now, one thing for sure I want to remind you is that in both the Learn Thai Yoga online classes and the Dropbox for graduates, I have put links for an incredible amount of clinical trials, research, hospital-based research, university-based research, which validates that this idea of energy psychology and tapping for psychological, mental, and emotional health is actually valid from a scientific point of view, as well as from, of course, our experiential and our historical point of view of applications. All right, so let's start with premise number 25. The cause of all negative emotion is disruption of the body's energy system. Disruption of the body's energy system. Negative emotions are symptoms of imbalance or disruption in the matrix body or the body's energy system. Now, when I say, just to come back to this one more time, when I use the term matrix body, I mean the all-encompasses body that is physical, energetic, emotional, etheric, quantum, light body, meridians, chakras, send lines, extracorporeal electromagnetic fields, plasma fields, photonic energy distribution networks, plus the chemical, biological, physiological, organic, endocrine, innervation of nervous system, communication-based, every single thing that we would include in this idea of what is a human biologic transformational machine. Just to be clear. So these imbalances in the matrix body are the body's energy system. And I want to keep reiterating to you that we are not just, it's not just that we have an energy system, we are an energy system interacting with other energy systems, but specifically within our local field of influence, energy system. These imbalances, which can cause negative emotional symptoms, can range from a lack of harmony between the organs, in other words, just discord in communication between the organs and the parts of the organs, to excesses or deficiencies between the chakra or between the many secondary and or tertiary energy points, which we call low marma lines, nadi, meridians, Huna chords, and many others. Imbalance is usually the result of some harmful influence originating either from outside the person or from within. Imbalance can also be the result of trauma and or discord and frustration in the expression of one's nature, especially in regard to sexual being, and especially these expressions in children and in young people. Because, of course, typically in our Western culture and in many religious cultures around the world, the one thing we don't teach children is how to handle their sexuality and their sexual being. In fact, there are many people and cultures and societies that don't want to even acknowledge that sexual energy is present from birth. I really suggest, again, Dr. Wilhelm Reich's writing on orgasm and origins of sexual function, and especially in children, and what happens when sexuality and the expression of healthy sexuality is inhibited or is distorted or becomes a source of trauma, how that carries over to the inclination to build negativity in the system called antagonistic muscular tension or sympathetic atonia, and how that then becomes an operative principle in distorting our perception, our function in life, our health, physically, physiologically, for the rest of our life. So there's an outside resource that's really good for you. Not enough pages in this little book to cover some of these issues. Negative emotions can be both a cause and they can be an effect of physical distortion and armoring of the tissue. Negative emotion can be released or corrected by balancing the body's energy system. So let's go back up. Negative emotions can be both a cause and an effect of physical distortion. So, for example, if you're in a car wreck and you are severely physically distorted and or traumatized, injured, and so on as a result of being in that car wreck and the nexus of that event, the sum of that event, can cause extreme experience of negative emotions. Okay, which can be persistent and can then become operative principles or original causative principles of further distortion, indefinitely. We believe indefinitely unless somewhere, somehow, some way, somebody steps in and helps you to resolve the dissonance that the trauma or the accident or the car wreck or whatever it was actually caused you. Now we're on page 68. Premise number 26. We change physiology by affecting energy. We can affect or cause changes in the body's neurology, physiology, chemistry, even tissue states individually by affecting energy. We can support or cause effects of either a negative or positive manner in the body by affecting the energy of the body. We can also affect energy by changing physiology. So let me give you just one real simple, easy to verify example. Okay, if you just sit still for a minute, close your eyes, and create the intention to relax. If we were measuring the state of tonicity and tension in your body, within a couple of breaths, we would notice that the indications would change. Everything from oxygen perfusion to the surface conductivity or galvanic electrical impulse at the surface of the skin would change. EEG brainwaves would change. EKG would change simply by creating the intention. Now, whether that's sustainable or not depends on your discipline and practice. But it's common common understanding that we can change physiology by affecting energy, and vice versa. One more time, energy is not airy-fairy. Energy is real. Energy is scientifically valid. The effects of energy on every part of us have been scientifically validated. And we want to take these principles and make use of them. Now, of course, this is traditional. In my Thai school, for example, and part of the Wat Po Association of Thai Traditional Medical Schools is the Wat Ampel Wat program on Toksen, for example. And that temple has illustrations of energy balancing using physical tapping on monks and clients or patients or whatnot that date back 400 years. So anecdotally, we'd say this is quite ancient technology. We are just now accumulating a body politic of scientific investigation that literally proves what our elders and our forefathers have been telling us for generations. Premise number 27. The body is a stress-adaptive organism and vehicle for transformation. So, in order to look at issues with the body, in other words, i.e. to fix the body, I want to keep coming back to my understanding of what is a body. What is the body? What is the function of the body in this manifested reality that we find ourselves in, the ordinary world that we find ourselves in? Our machine, and we're thinking of this body because it carries our consciousness, but it is not our consciousness. Our machine's purpose is to be a vehicle for the spirit. It's been said. However, the implication is a bit unclear. The body or machine carries us, or spirit or essence, around like a glorified taxi. No. The body's job is first to host and then to affect the essence, literally to transform the essence to such a degree that the essence eventually becomes the mind and controls the body. Further, the body develops the essence to a point of self-awareness and substance that will continue intact past the death of the body or life of the machine. One of the machine's abilities is to teach us that we are not machines. We are something else. In other words, the machine is the machine, but we are not the machine. I, in quotation marks, the big I, is not the machine. I am something other than the machine, or at least that's the goal. If we are nothing more and nothing less than the sum of reactive mechanical impulses in existence derived from the action of the five senses going through the atmosphere of the planet, then we are, by definition, we are not conscious. We're not conscious, okay? Essence, we think, is the real I. Essence is the real us. Essence is that part of us which in yogic terms is referred to as the Atman, or the part of us that is actually has its existence, its life, if you will, its continuum of manifestation outside of the limitations of ordinary time and physical space. But in normal consciousness, we are separate from this. The role of the body in this life is to create the opportunity to connect to that essence, and then in such a way that that connection will be sustained after the body is no longer with us. And I know this really maybe tramples on some of your religious or metaphysical feet or toes, but it is the theory that we're working with. It's a premise. Premise number 28. We are not the machine, nor are we the events which happen to it. So I already mentioned that. I am not the machine. The machine is other than I. We are not the sum of the events that occur to the machine, human biological transformational machine. We are not that which happens to us or around us. Although external events may influence our machine's life and circumstances, essence occurs outside of the direct influence of transient events and is not identified as them. In other words, you cannot make me anything. You cannot make me anything that I'm not already, and you cannot make me experience a psychological state or emotional state that is not already within me to some degree or another. When examining the patterns of disturbance and manifestations of negativity and the expression of negative emotions, we commonly find there is a story which is cited as the cause or genesis of the negative occurrences or negative emotions, whatever they might be. There is association with the story. The story may be held so strongly that virtually every significant part of life may be affected by and held against the template of this story. But here's the really important thing to understand about our stories, about your stories that you use to explain, defend, and justify your negative emotional states or attitudes. A story is an event. What happens to us is often of no more consciousness than rainstorms or other natural phenomenon. But we take the emotions, especially the negative emotions which occur at that time, or occur at the same time as the event, to be real, to be definitive in some context, and they're stored and nurtured, becoming emotional templates that attract and gather all such similar stories and events. Stories are interpreted according to the degree of similarity to the key trigger events and stories that set up the original energy imbalance. Often, there was electrical imbalance before the events and or occurrence of the story, which forever after is seen as the cause of the negative emotions. Whereas the story itself is not positive or negative. The story is not a cause of any particular emotional state or another. One person, there's a Native American story, for example, that illustrates this point, where a young man has an accident, falls off his horse and breaks his leg. And his father goes to him asking, says, "Why are you crying?" He says, "Well, because I fell off my horse and I broke my leg, and that's really bad." And the father goes, "Oh, okay, I see. Why is it really bad?" He goes, "Well, because I was on my way," and then fill in the blanks, there's variations of the story. "I was on my way to join a war party to defend the village, and now I'm not going to be able to do that. I won't be able to prove I'm a man." Another variation is that I was on my way to go and pick up my soon-to-be wife, and now I'm not going to be able to do that and prove that I'm a man. And there's all these variations of it, okay? I'm not going to be able to go hunting and prove that I'm a man. And the father goes, "Okay, well, but breaking your leg, that's not good, that's not bad." The other young men who rode off to join the war party all died. And so it turns out that had this young man who broke his leg gone with the war party, he would have died just like everybody else. So it turns out that in fact his broken leg was not a bad thing, that his broken leg actually saved his life. In the big picture of life, it turned out to be a good thing. So the event itself, the breaking of the leg, in this metaphor, in this Native American traditional story, was not good or bad. Our emotions and our emotional predecessors, predilections, pre-existing old unresolved negative emotions and the attitudes they resent, give us the impression, positive or negative, to relate to what happens to us. For example, one client of mine with a 20-year history of neck and shoulder pain, when questioned about the history of her debilitating condition, told the story of an accident in a car which took place in a supermarket parking lot. She was backing up to pull out of her space and backed into another car parked behind her. She was going no more than 5 miles an hour. However, she didn't see the car. She didn't know she was backing into the car behind her. It hadn't breached her consciousness. However, she was surprised and felt her head move, followed by a sharp pain. She was eventually medically diagnosed as having trauma to her neck called whiplash. Now, going for various treatments over a period of 20 years not only appeared not to be helpful, but her condition deteriorated to the point of disability. And I mean medical disability. She could no longer work or go to a job or function normally in her life because of this debilitating, crippling condition of deteriorating whiplash. This was her status when she first came to my office. So in her interview, she relates this pivotal moment, this event, and her subsequent story with a lot of emotion, I want to say. Mostly, she was trying to convince herself and she's actually quite expert at doing this by this point, and anyone around her, that her pain and disability were entirely justified, having a clear origin, and I want to add this, no clear solution. The classic justifiable or, oh, poor me, oh, poor baby. However, as I looked at her from the point of view of someone who understands that energy precedes physiology, and that pain and suffering are manifestations of negative emotions, which are caused by disruptions in the body's energy field, I simply went on and started balancing points which should have had no impact on the story. After a couple of sessions, as we were sitting and discussing her level of pain after a treatment, she suddenly started relating a different story. The new revised story. Now, this is the first time that this new story came out. This new story, this new revised story, didn't begin in the parking lot. It began earlier in the day when she had a fuss or a fight with a stepfather who had accused her of being irresponsible and lazy. This had caused her to become extremely upset, and as she was pulling out of that parking spot, she was crying severely until the moment of impact. Now, literally, as she sat there in front of me, I immediately treated her again for issues based on that fight, using the words irresponsible and lazy, and in less time than 5 minutes she was pain-free. Pain-free for the first time in 20 years. No organic or structural corrections or alignments were done. In fact, the exact words that I first started using with her were, even though I started with a psychological reversal point here, collarbone point, because she's had this issue for so long, even though my stepfather accused me of being irresponsible, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though my stepfather accused me of being lazy and it hurt my feelings, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though my stepfather tried to convince me that I was irresponsible and lazy, and it hurt my feelings, and I felt that it was devastating to have someone who loves me and knows me to say in their learned opinion that I was irresponsible and lazy. I deeply and completely accept myself. I deeply and completely forgive myself. I deeply and completely love myself. This irresponsibility, this accusation of being lazy, this accusation of being irresponsible and lazy, this accusation of being irresponsible, this irresponsible feeling, this irresponsibility. And I went through this 3 times. Before I did that, though, let me sidetrack a little bit. It's part of our protocol. I asked her on a scale of 1 to 10, depression, anxiety, just the psychic disturbance that thinking about this fight that she had with her stepfather on a scale 1 to 10, with 0 being it's not an issue at all and just water off a duck's back, and 10 being utterly and completely devastating, she said it was 9 or 10 because she believed her stepfather when he said this, and it completely threw her off, and was the primary thing on her mind right up to the moment of impact in that parking lot. The format, after we did the 3 rounds of tapping, it was a 4. After we did 3 rounds of further tapping with additional emphasis, it was a 2. After it was another 3 rounds, so 9 rounds altogether, working through some variation of these issues as I got her to speak and clarify exactly how she interpreted those words. It went to 0. The format for the treatments I was giving her is what we call a general energy balancing. If, as her story would seem to say, the nature of her disability was the structural problems associated with this traumatic event and the subsequent tissue distortions or side effects, there really is no way that uncovering a root event relating to the event's negative emotions would help. Ending her disability would take more than simply balancing her energy. So, we concluded the cause of her pain and eventual disability was not the event, but rather it was the negative emotions in place before the event, which the event naturally fed into. The event was stored and cataloged and confirmed the negative emotions. Once we resolved the electrical imbalance associated with the story was no longer able to continue to cause the pain. It's been several years now since Miss Betty's sessions, and there have been no further recurrence of her original neck pain, and she is no longer disabled. I guess from a medical point of view, it could be said that she just happened to have a spontaneous correction or remission of a 20-year acute medical disability for no apparent reason during a tapping session with me. You be the judge. Now, why neck pain? Well, because that's what we call the local focus, or the locale where the physical expression of life intersects with the story. In other words, it was the head and neck that were shocked. In other stories, it would have been, it was the wrist that was grabbed. It was the chest that was pushed. It was the genitalia that were assaulted. It was, do you get my drift? I hope you do. Premise number 29, moving on. Balance the fields. So we're not curing anything. We are bringing energy, attention, consciousness, breath, and pressure to an energy imbalance causing a distortion in the perception of emotional states and the creation of negative emotions. One of our goals is to weaken the machine's electrical field dominance in relation to the field strength and influence of the essence. To be asleep, in quotation marks, it's not there in the book, but to be asleep means that the machine's field is dominant. The statement to be awake means the machine's field is less dominant, the essence field is more dominant. By tapping, by using these techniques of BET and energy psychology, TFT and EFT, what we are doing is we are changing the balance scales of machine versus essence dominance. We want essence and consciousness to be more dominant. That in and of itself, by increasing our capacity to be aware and to interact with actually what's happening in our life and to reduce the role of accidents, is transformation at its very most fundamental idea. All right, premise number 30, still on page 71. Eyes equal sources of inference. One reason the machine's electrical field is so dominant is because of the accumulated interference wave patterns aggregated and stored in the tissues. Let me say that again. One reason the machine's electrical field is so dominant is because of the accumulated interference wave patterns aggregated and stored in the tissues, organs, and physical structures of the body. In other words, every structure in the body not only has an independent electrical magnetic field, like even every blood cell has an electromagnetic field, but the sum of all of these cells have electrical fields that would be the field of the bicep, or the electrical field of the heart, which has been studied so extensively, for example. But the sum of these complex and mostly negative fields is like having 100 random talk radio stations all broadcasting on the same frequency at the same time and frequency, that frequency being that of the needful emergency broadcast frequency of the essence or true nature. The proper agency or steward for that key frequency will have to come in and close down the pirate broadcast, or at least remove them to a less vital frequency bandwidth. This action intentionally preserves the vital frequencies for more appropriate use. Our emergency and urgent broadcast in this example is the direct, uncompromising communications from the essential self. We can't get it because we can't hear it. These many stations broadcasting interference negatively affecting both the machine and possible work of the machine are the many I's. I's equal sources of interference. All right, let me say this another way. For example, in traditional Chinese medicine, every organ, every tissue has a personality. Every organ, every tissue, every meridian, every bone has a voice in the conversation, the magnificent conversation of the body politic. And some of these voices are louder than others. And some of what determines which voices are louder than others is completely situationally eventful, or determined by events. Certain parts of us wake up more when we're under attack. Certain parts of us wake up more when we're hungry. Certain parts of us wake up more when we have an infection or something is attacking our immune system. We wake up more when we physically injure structure or tissue of the body, chronically or acute. In other words, a slow burning sunburn will start out with, I love the feel of the sunshine on my skin, to I feel tired, I'm getting fatigued, I'm thirsty, I don't feel right, I have a fever, I'm gonna die if I don't get out of the sun. And so this voice of the body responding to ordinary sunlight goes from very low and background and even positive to completely taking over your consciousness and your machine to shut you down to get you out of the sun. Okay? That's not the essence. That is the body. That's the matrix body. That is the human biologic transformational machine talking. It's not the essence. These communications, depending on the layers of right or not right within you, can be overwhelming. They are literally the white noise behind every thought. So we do have an essence. There is a more conscious part of us. It's not the brain. As in Ayurveda, the brain is an organ just like any other organ, and subject to all the whims and whimsies of environmental and eventful stimulation or not, as any other organ in the body. The essence is something other than. So all the voices of all these tissues and all the voices of all these organs, in my example of sunburn, the voice of the integumentary system, of the skin, for example, and of the organs that are also affected by the functioning of the skin, those are all eyes. They're all actually represent psychological constructs as they are communicating in the sea of communication of all of the other parts. Some of them work together, and we call them aggregates. And they're going to be louder, more recognizable, more routinely present in the background of your mental life and your emotional life. Others will be more rare, and it'll be situational. Everything about you is mechanical, except what is not. The body entirely, the mind and spirit as well, is entirely mechanical. I know, you'd like to think otherwise, and there's a lot of New Age sort of concept and New Age teaching that actually says that these parts are conscious. But our tradition, our multi-decade, multi-thousand-year tradition says everything about you is mechanical, except what is not. Following cause and effect, affinity and repulsion, utilization of resources is any other mechanical or unconscious mechanism. In classical Indian medicine or Ayurveda, the mind is described as an organ, and no more special than any other organ. There might be such a thing as essential nature or essence apart from the life of the machine, but only hypothetically and only possibly in a transformed machine of a self-realized, trained, awakened, I want to add disciplined, and also lucky individual, because there actually are many things in life and in nature and in our environment, in our society, in our culture, that are contrary to our transformation, that are contrary to our process of becoming a self-realized individual. Premise number 32. All chronic disorder and disease in the machine is supported by negative emotion. Notice the first word of premise 32, all. All chronic disorder and disease in the machine is supported by negative emotion. And I know some of these premises, that's what they are, they're premises, might be challenging for you. But I'm asking you as your teacher, as an Ajahn and master in traditional medicine, and as a master of toxin and tapping therapies and energy balancing, to just consider them. Take them on, try them on. If they work for you, fine. If they don't, then let it go. But don't let it go before you really try to wrap your head around it. Considering premise number 25, the cause of all negative emotion is disruption of the body's energy system. When we say the ultimate cause of all chronic disorder and disease is also a disruption of the body's energy system, furthermore, disruptions of the body's energy system, past or current, support disorder and disease. So these types of disruptions are both cause and support for imbalance at the same time. We can only surmise that correcting this energy issue will have an immediate and profound effect on both the current condition and the future development course of severity of it. Now, because of the time of this lesson or class and what's happening in the greater world, I'm going to postulate something. So are you saying that our negative emotional issues, our negative attitudes, our disruptions in our body's energy system can temper the way a virulent, pathogenic, and in some cases deadly virus or bacteria may affect us and the outcomes of that infection? Well, I'm going to say yes. That's what the ancient teachings say. And just because there's a new virus in town, a new bad guy in town, a new black hat virus in town, does not change our fundamental understandings of how human beings get through in the world and react to events and react to pathogens and react to invasive exogenic attacks. None of it has changed. How human beings' role of emotions is so important in the role and the process of not just becoming sick, but also becoming well. Nothing has changed. And just because we feel more fright, or we feel more fear, or we've been led to believe it's a more real or not, a more immediate threat, and there's a sense of despair and desperation and reacting to it, does not reduce or eliminate, does not take away from the role of energy in the body to handle it, to deal with it, both physically, mentally, spiritually, and energetically, every other way. Premise number 33 on the bottom of page 72. Our ability to understand and correctly determine the nature of pain and or source of pain within us is severely limited. It's entirely subject to distortion at almost every level of perception. Neurologists inform us as to the phenomenon of the pathological reflex arc, for example, in physical pain issues. For example, in the case of a common headache, the pain is obviously in some part of the head, giving any reasonable person the thought or feeling that there is something wrong in their head. Not true. In most cases, the pain is actually a referral pain from some localized disturbance or trigger point, an area of low oxygen and high neurologic activity, which could be located possibly in any or several different locations all the way down to the upper torso. Distortion and misinterpretation of the nature, source, and cause of any pain is the norm, not the exception. Also, pain can be originating from any part or multiple parts of us at any time, and these connections are generally not easily observed. The pain can be physical, but non-specific, in the sense that it's a referral pain from some other area of the body under stress. The pain can be emotional. It can be symptomatic of an energy disturbance. It can be, in a sense, a memory from an unresolved traumatic issue arising from the past or layers of all the above. So, for example, in the case of migraines, we clinically say if you have a migraine, probably you don't. 99% of people who are diagnosed with migraines don't have a migraine. A migraine, in a classical sense, is actually an actual physiologic distortion in your head that's causing the pain. Most people don't have that. Most people who claim to have a classic migraine with all of the symptoms, okay, all of the symptoms, in the most severe way possible, have a localized distortion, have an area of extremely low oxygen or ischemia with accompanying taut fiber bands and trigger points right here on the leading edge of the trapezius, which are referring pain via the spinal cord, via the ISS, into the inside corner of the eye on that side, or into the ear on that side, or into the occipital region of that person's head. It's nothing wrong with their head. It's a problem with their shoulders. Get it? It's a problem with perfusion of oxygen in tissue in a localized area. It's a problem with high neurologic activity, stress, and sympathetic atonia, which could be emotional in origin. In other words, have you noticed that when you get scared, you get tight? If someone scares you and you jump, that jump reflex is a whole body tensioning, or a sympathetic atonia, a sympathetic tonification, which originates in the spinal cord and has to do with our lizard brain. That tension can persist. In simple terms, so stress of life causing you fear can cause a general tonicity, which can cause low oxygen states, high toxicity accumulation in particular tissues, can cause referral problems and neural reflexes. That's just emotion can cause that alone. In simple terms, the best thing pain represents is a symptom and indicator that something needs attention. However, in the absence of some overt trauma, like a wound, pain, in and of itself, it has little specific meaning. It's like an idiot light on the car's dashboard. It means have a look under the hood and always do a general diagnostic. Always check everything fundamental before deciding what the pain might be. Whatever it means something only in the context of the complete functioning of the person and that person's life. So here's the thing. Most medical therapists, when they are treating a pain issue, they are pain and region of pain phobic. So if you say you have a pain in your foot, they just stare at your foot. They x-ray your foot. They weigh and measure your foot. They look for distortions in the foot. In and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that. But the foot is part of a person. And so it's not the foot that's experiencing the pain, because maybe the foot doesn't experience pain at a level of consciousness. It's the person who has the foot attached to them that's experiencing pain. So you always have to come back to the sum of the experience of that person to put that pain into context, to have a better idea. And also, I want to say, let's eliminate emotional source of pain energy imbalance, source of pain; disturbance of the body's energy system, source of pain; negative attitude, source of pain, before we get too concerned with physical, structural, functional disability as a cause of pain. Because here's a really weird thing. Two people can have a broken foot with almost exactly the same pathology. One person have great pain and one person have almost no pain. The difference is in here. I want to help you find that different place, both for yourself and for your clients. Awesome. Love my tea in the morning. Premise number 34. Psychological mental illness and negative emotions are the same and have the same causes. Got to be clear about this. Psychological illness, mental illness, and negative emotions are all the same and have the same causes. So-called psychological illnesses and mental diseases of the mind do not exist apart from us as symptoms of disruptions of the body's energy system. The modern Western psychology, or the fields of psychiatry and psychology, have missed the boat. In fact, there are even famous psychiatrists like Dr. Thomas Saz, who wrote a really famous book on the myth of mental illness. But in classical Ayurveda and Buddhist psychiatry, and Ayurveda psychiatry, and Native American psychiatry, in and of itself, there's no such thing as a mental illness. Modern psychiatry seeks to define mental illness as a result of purely chemical imbalances in the brain and completely ignores the causative factors of disruptions of the body's energy system. Doesn't know it even exists. So how can it compare if it doesn't acknowledge that it even exists? Using this model has been an almost complete failure to the many persons referred for various treatments. The chemical imbalance model does nothing good for patients and is a blatant push to develop drug and chemical dependencies for producing income and control over a person without their consent. In other words, the primary objective of chemical psychiatry and chemical-based psychological mental health treatment is compliance. And you're rated on your more or less functional compliance as whether the treatment is being successful or not. And no one ever has been cured. No one is being cured by chemical drugs now, psychiatric drugs. And no one, in my opinion, is likely to be cured of any mental illness using a chemical pharmaceutical drug. Most, if not all, mental illnesses are described as aggregates of symptoms of negative emotions by us. We treat the negative emotions to support the mental health, and guess what? We are highly effective. And I'm not going to say that we cure mental illness. What I'm going to say is that we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of clients who no longer have their mental illness as a causative factor in their emotional or mental life. They no longer have the fears or phobias. They no longer have the compulsions. They no longer have the schizophrenic inclinations, the depressive, manic depressive inclinations. They're no longer violent to themselves or to others. In the Navajo tradition, for example, a schizophrenic patient of Navajo medicine man would be first diagnosed as having insufficient beauty within them. And part of the treatment would be to restore inner beauty to them, both through ceremony and nature. And they have a 30,000-year history of treating what we call mental disease in the Western medicine way, by restoring absence of beauty to people's lives, by restoring love and compassion to people's lives. In the Buddhist medicine, the 4 primary therapies for mental illness are the restorations of love, joy, compassion, and equanimity. And the balanced mind is the direct end result of bringing practical expression of love, compassion, and joy to the person's life. Doesn't matter how extreme their mental illness is. A story about healing on page 75. I've thought about on this bothersome incident for over 25 years. Actually, now it's over 30 years. And finally have the answer that was given to me right back then. To understand my question and issue, I think it would be beneficial for me to share the story as I witnessed it. In 1982, it was a hot Saturday afternoon in April, and around the time of the Songkran Water Festival in Nong Kham, Thailand. And I was in a group class practicing what the Thai call Wai Kru. The Wai Kru we were practicing that day was about paying respect to 3 teachers and 4 directions, and is a physical form similar to Tai Chi or Qigong. Wai Kru. To pay respect. If you've ever been to southern Thailand in April, you know it's hot. The weather averaged about 100 degrees daily and about 100% humidity. Mind-boggling hot, for me anyway. Miserably hot, but hey, life goes on, and we were in school and in class and had to practice regardless. The class was outdoors under a shaded pavilion area of the school. And we were, as we were practicing, I noticed a boy about age 13, 14 years of age slowly walking into the compound with a severe limp. Even at a distance, I could see he was in some great pain. He walked over close to where we were practicing and sat down on a bench there. I excused myself and I walked over to him to see what was the matter. As I got close to him, I could see that his leg was broken. A nasty compound fracture with the bone visibly protruding from the skin. Oh my God, that's awful. More than this, it was immediately apparent that his leg was severely infected. It was swollen badly enough that the skin was splitting. And well, it just looked awful and it smelled awful, as you can imagine. I immediately went to the headmaster, Pak Kru Samai Mesamon, to interrupt him and to basically tell him what was going on. I was sure at that moment that the boy needed emergency medical treatment, and also knew the nearest Western clinic was over 2 hours away by bus. We were in Nong Kham at that time. That's before the superhighway was built. Oh my God. It used to take forever to get into town. Pakru asked me what was the matter. I explained about the boy who Pakru could clearly see, who was now lying on the bench. He told me to go back to class. I said, but Pakru, this boy needs medical help, emergency medical help. He once again told me to mind my own business and go back to my place in class. This time, I was adamant, as I was sure he didn't understand the severity of the boy's situation at all. Now, so I pleaded, and I said I would take him to the hospital at my own expense, but he needed antibiotics or he could die. Now, at this point, I should inform you, as you probably don't know unless you're in my classes, that the school I was in was a traditional Oriental medical school famous for producing doctors of traditional Thai medicine. Pakru Samai was not just the headmaster, he was the 36th generation of grandmasters leading that school. So here I am, the only Western student at that time, freaking out during an emergency and basically demanding Western antibiotics, as in, real medicine. Pakru told me not to worry, that as soon as the class finished, he would go to see to the boy. But if I wanted to remain a student, I had to stop interrupting and get back in class. Now I have to say, at that moment there was a critical tension and a critical decision that has affected my life ever since. I surrendered. Maybe you wouldn't have. Maybe you would have just said, to heck with it, and grabbed up the boy and headed out the door. But you're not me, and you didn't have my background and my understanding, and you didn't have my trust in my teacher. I surrendered, and I did as he instructed. Paul Cruz said that the issue was between him and the God, and that if it was God's will that helped manifest for the boy, then it would. However, being hysterical was not the way to manifest healing for the boy. How about that? Being hysterical was not an accepted method to manifest healing for anyone. That's true then, that's true today. Freaking out is not the path to being helpful. After class, about 20 minutes later, he walked over to the boy with me. About 1 inch behind him, I'm like on its heels, he came close and looked at the boy and his leg, and he said, he lightly shook him into awareness because the boy was kind of semi-comatose. And when his eyes focused, Pakru Samai asked him, what's the matter? In other words, why are you here? I was amazed. I mean, it's obvious. He had a bone sticking out of a huge and oozing leg wound. What kind of question was this, and why was he asking in the first place? I mean, it was clear someone needed to take charge and just scoop this boy up and run like the wind to a real hospital. And even so, he might not make it. But here we are asking silly questions. The boy looked up and said he had broken his leg in a motorcycle accident, and actually scooter accident, and knowing of the school, Putai Sawan, had walked from his wreck on the highway, left his bike on the highway, and had walked seeking help. Pakru then asked him, what can we do for you? Again, I thought myself, this is insane. What is going on here? It was surreal. Up to this moment, I would have sworn that the school and the community I was living in and studying in was one of the most compassionate and gentle and loving environments I had ever been in and ever even experienced in my life. I describe it sometimes as the first functional family experience that I had in my life. And then all of a sudden, without warning, the very first serious case I see, and they're all being mean. What did it mean? The conversation continued. Please help me, the boy answered. Help you with what? Pakru replied. Fix my leg, the boy answered. Pakru asked him, have you paid respect today? Now, meaning, have you paid respect or paid homage to the Buddha today? Most Thai are Buddhists, and the term Buddha is synonymous with God or Spirit. No, the boy shook his head, hung his head, and somewhat sadly said no again. Pakru says, we will help you after you pay respect. When you're done paying respect, come to see me and I will help you in the name of the Buddha. I turned to Pakru, incredulous at the further delay and apparent lack of concern to my eyes, and I said, Pakru, even if this boy could pay respect, his leg is broken. He can no longer walk. How is he going to do puja? He looked at me and he said, well, carry him, if that is what it takes. And then he literally turned and without another word walked away. Oh my God. I stood there transfixed, not really knowing proper cause of action. What do I do now? I asked myself. I was in anguish looking at that poor child, but something inside asked me to do as I was told. So after a moment of frozenness, indecision, I went over to the altar, I picked up some joss or incense, and I brought it back. I gently picked up the boy and helped carry him over to the first of the three altars. At Putai Sawan, there were three principal altars, and the ritual was to go to each and ask for a blessing, burn a stick of incense or two as a way of paying respect. We made our way a bit quickly, as I was still thinking it was possible for me to make off to the highway, maybe nobody would notice, and hitchhike a ride to town. Anyway, we came back to the pavilion, and Pakru walks back and once again asks the boy what he wants. The boy says the same thing again and asks him to help him. Pakru Samai says that he cannot help, but all help comes from Spirit, and he would assist the boy. He then placed his hands on the boy's head and told him to be still, as he was writhing and clearly uncomfortable. The boy immediately calmed, took a deep breath, and stopped moving. Pakru told him to close his eyes, which he did. Pakru said to relax, and the boy seemed to do this for the first time since walking in. However, he was still sweating profusely and was very, very red in the face. I mean, I was sweating profusely. It was over 100 degrees. Pakru went over to the altar and obtained some quote-unquote blessing oil, yellow oil, you guys know what I'm talking about, from a small bottle. It was thick and yellowish, smelling of jasmine. He then went to the boy and touched him several times in different points on his body while reciting a prayer or mantra. I cannot tell you what he was saying, but it was short and repetitive. I can't tell you because I don't want to tell you. I'll tell you if you come to class. He then took the bottle back to the altar and appeared finished. As he was working for about 5 minutes, the boy's complexion evened out and he apparently settled into a deep sleep or coma. I don't know which. Pakru asks for me and another to ease the boy onto a mat by the wall and let him sleep. Again, I asked about taking him to the hospital, and again I was refused. And at that point, I was told it was his karma. And if he died, it was not my concern, not to be my concern. He had come to the school for Pakru to fix him, and Pakru was the responsible one. I placed a bandage over the exposed bones to keep the flies out of the wound. They let me do that. I sat by the boy the balance of the day and night. He seldom moved or showed much of life, and once in a while I would check his pulse, and it was there and steady, and he slept like this for 2 full days. I hardly ate and I hardly slept the whole time. I was expecting that at any time I would check his pulse or his breath and he'd be deceased. On the early morning of the 3rd day, I was asleep nearby when the boy stirred and woke up asking for water. I jumped up and got him a glass of water, and he looked completely different. He was weakened but not dire. His color was completely different. I looked at his leg, and the swelling was reduced, and there was a scab. There was no sign of the bone at all. And from that point, the boy continued to get better. He ate and was chatty with the other students and children there. Now, I want to say this. I now believe that at some point when I passed out, that Pakru or one of the other teachers, Pichai or one of the other teachers at the school, had probably come over to the boy and had set that broken bone manually. But I didn't physically observe that myself. It's what I believe. 14 days after he first dragged himself into the compound, this boy was up on his feet trying to play a game of takraw with the kids. And if you know what takraw is, maybe you should look it up. You would know it's like the ultimate hacky sack. It's a game like volleyball played with your feet. If you think you know how to play hacky sack, look up Thai takraw game. I was watching, and more than a little in wonder when Pakru came up behind me and beside me and angrily calls the boys over. Angrily calls the boy over. The boy walks over, and Pakru asks him, "How's the leg?" The boy looks down and wiggles his toes before he says, "I guess it's okay." Ni pen sabai kap. Pakru then points out toward the gate and says, "Pai lao, then off you go. And don't forget to pay respect every day." The boy turned, shook my hand wide to me, said "Kap kun krap," turned and walked away. I never saw him again. Life went on and classes took up much space. Learning acupuncture, Thai yoga, martial arts at the same time in a traditional school takes everything that you can dig up to stay on top, especially when you have some difficulties like I certainly did at that time with the language. About a month later, I was speaking with Pakru, who spoke excellent English, by the way, having obtained a degree from Oxford and advanced degree from university in Thailand in physical education. I asked him what was the essence of healing that was the minimum required to create a healing occurrence. I still had the recent events in my mind, and he explained it like this. And he said, "Anthony," that's my Thai name, "Anthony kap, kun Anthony," or now Mo Anthony. A person comes to you for help and asks for your help. You agree to help them, and they get well. That's it. Everything else is just window dressing. Can you see why this event has weighed on my mind? Through my continued education and clinical practice, I've maintained this question, how to do this. I have over the years come to understand that we have always had the keys to healing, and they are so simple, and they are so elegant, and they are so easy. My hope and my ambition in all of this is that you would come and see me, and that you'd spend time with me, and that you'd let me teach more about these lessons and the details of these experiences for yourself, for your family, for your clients, for your patients, for your practice, for your community, for the world. We can apply these principles in anything. We can apply these principles to any disease, to any cancer, to any diabetes, to any heart disease. Some people might call this faith healing, but I'm going to say I don't have a problem with that. We need to have faith in healing. And we need to have strategies and functional and practical techniques and methodologies that when we see the end results, when we see the positive end results from utilizing them, that they give us faith that we can rely on them for current and future use as well, and that we can teach these skills to our family. I was never taught how to work on my old unresolved negative emotional issues as a child, and it cost me years and years of my life dealing with the consequences of negative emotions, fears and phobias, anxieties, depressions, violence, abuse. It cost me years of my life. I thank God, I thank Spirit, I thank Great Spirit, I thank all my teachers that I've been able to have this insight and have this understanding. Am I the only person who understands this? Absolutely not. Right now, there are whole associations of professional psychologists that have given up the drugs and are now using tapping, aka energy psychology, as their primary methodology for treating mental illness. So we have no excuse not to do this. You have no excuse. The primary function of SomaVeda integrated traditional therapies is to bring healing and wellness to the whole person. And if you do physical therapy, if you rub on people for money, and you do not address the emotional components of pain and suffering, then you cannot call yourself a holistic practitioner. If you call yourself a doctor, but you don't handle the emotional, mental, and psychological aspects of pain and suffering and disease process in your clients, in my opinion, you shouldn't be able to call yourself a doctor. You may be some kind of a therapist, but you shouldn't call yourself a doctor, because you're not teaching your clients how to be powerful and to overcome their own issues that contribute to their own pain and suffering. So for that I chide you, but also for that I want to offer you inspiration that you can learn how to do this. You can perfect the practice in just a few hours, and I'm really happy to be able to help you to do that. Okay? I hope you've enjoyed these lessons from the BET, Bio-Tapp BET manual, Touch, Balance, and Attunement Technique. Touch, Balance, and Attunement Technique. If you have any questions or concerns, even if you have questions and concerns about specific clients, if you personally would like to consult with me as a therapist, we can arrange that. God bless. And see, my battery went out on my light, so obviously we're done. Kap kun ma kap, sawat di kap, kun sabai di re. I wish you well.